Hey, Doctor Who fans, welcome to the review here for the fifth episode of the series of Doctor Who Series 2. We're talking about the story and the engine. This is the story that finally was shooting at was Doctor Who. One of his wishes have come true, and that is he's finally going to get a Nigerian episode where he's facing a Nigerian god, and that's exactly what he basically got for tonight's episode, didn't he? I mean, what can I say? I mean, I'm not going to go too long on this review really, because I feel like next week is where most of the energy has to go to because of the amount of shocks and surprises that we've been promised by Russell we can expect next week. So we know next week is going to be a big one. Yeah, we know it's going to be a big one for Doctor Who because there's going to be a lot of stuff to unpack come next week. But I thought we'll go through some of the pointers of this story first. One pointer that really took me by surprise, and I think it's going to take a lot of people surprise, and I'm sure a lot of people have already pointed it out, fugitive Doctor's involvement in this story. Yes, that moment where the Doctor recognizes that Queen character. I mean, I forgot her title because it was an unusual title to make out, but either way, that Queen character talks about, the Doctor says he recognizes her, and it turns out that character actually traveled with the fugitive Doctor at one point. So yes, the fugitive Doctor making an appearance in this episode, which is kind of funny because it was not about a month or so ago, we saw, or actually 2 months ago, if you think about it, we saw Jo Martin at the premiere this current series. So that basically means that she was there. She wasn't there by accident. She was indeed involved. This story specifically, which now makes me wonder if we're going to see the fugitive Doctor in the finale of this year's series, considering now we're seeing flashbacks with the fugitive Doctor, who we haven't seen since Jodie Whittaker's run of Doctor Who. So it's really interesting that the fugitive Doctor's all of a sudden just showed up in this story, and we haven't heard from her since the end of Jodie Whittaker's time as the Doctor. So it's interesting now she's showing up in Doctor Who again, which makes you wonder, does the fugitive Doctor have something to play in the reality war? We'll have to wait and see. But also it begs the question, because we see her and we know Michelle Gomez was at the premiere, and so was the actress behind Martha's mother was there. I wonder if we're going to see returns for potentially Missy, female master, and Martha Jones could be on the cards at the end of the series. What do we reckon? Do we think they're both going to show up at the finale? I think there's a chance we're going to see these two. Now that Jo Martin showed up, maybe Michelle Gomez and Martha returns could be imminent now. I don't know. It's just something I thought about when I saw this. Is like, if we're going to see people who we saw in the premiere show up, that obviously could mean a sign that we're going to see them return to Doctor Who very soon. I mean, there's only 3 episodes left, so going to be within these 3 episodes, we're bound to see these characters show up. So it's going to be very interesting to see how they show up again in the world of Doctor Who. But yeah, so that was mainly just for a flashback, because apparently that Queen character traveled with the fugitive Doctor at one point, even though, which is also another thing I find interesting is that Doctor kind of remembers being the fugitive Doctor in this story, when if we remember how Jodie Whittaker's Doctor, the 13th Doctor, she hid the fog watch that had the memories of basically her as the fugitive Doctor. I'm wondering if Shooting Atlas Doctor opened that fog watch and filled his head with those memories, because it's funny how he has those flashbacks almost instantly now. Maybe he's been opening the fog watch recently. What do you reckon? Do you reckon he's been able to he's opened the fog watch recently, or do you think this is just now something that's happened since the 13th Doctor, that since those recent regenerations we've seen for the Doctor, maybe all of a sudden he ends up having these memories now? I don't know. Just thought it was really interesting that he remembers being the fugitive Doctor, meeting that character when we're led to believe he's the Doctor doesn't even remember being the fugitive Doctor. Jodie Whittaker was in charge. So I'm just saying that because I mean, remembering the story points, it just makes you wonder, does Russell now make the Doctor remember being the fugitive Doctor? Or I don't know. It's just something I thought was really interesting. Another pointer in this story is, of course, we had the Nigerians got Spider God confirmed as Anix. Oh, I think I pronounced that right. Anix. Probably butchered the pronunciation. I'm sorry. Yes, that infamous Egyptian god Spider finally confirmed. A lot of people suspected it was that god, and it turned out to be true. And even though they tried to play it off like they could be multiple different identities, which guess that's just part of the character, really. The whole different identity thing. Yeah, that was really cool that we finally got to see this Egyptian god spider who's now who was carrying the barbershop through like sort of these infinite webs that I guess like sort of time travel webs in a way, which is interesting. They said they were traveling, so it makes you wonder if that spider had capabilities of time travel. Maybe. I just thought that was really interesting that was going on in that story. So yeah, so that was something that really I'm sure is going to pique some interest within the story. The whole spider time travel ability, the like that Egyptian god a spider has. Now, of course, another pointer in the story is that, of course, the Doctor talks about the fact that he was the engine and his stories control the engine. That scene was really cool, where we got to see scenes of previous Doctors, like the second Doctor's scene, Tomb of the Cyberman. We saw, oh yeah, that was really interesting because we saw when it came to Colin Baker's part, they showed scenes of Trial of a Time Lord, which is very particularly interesting considering previous episode, Conrad talks about not accepting the Doctor's reality, which is a quote that was taken from Trial of a Time Lord. So maybe there's some connections to Trial of a Time Lord in the finale. Could it be? Could it be tied to the Valyard? Could the Valyard be coming to the series finale? What do we reckon? I mean, now that they seem to be connecting the Trials of a Time Lord in these last two stories, maybe Valyard's going to be having a part to play in this finale now. Does that confirm it? I guess we'll have to wait and see. And then we also have scenes of obviously the Doctor from Voice the Down with the I am the Doctor scene, and then obviously Jodie Whittaker saying if people refuse, I'll never refuse. That scene from The Woman Who Fell to Earth, which was Jodie's first story as the 13th. We saw a nod to Christopher Eccleston's Ninth Doctor, obviously because it's 20 years since his Doctor arrived, brought the show back in 2005. Yes, 20 years since New Who began. And then we also see a little bit of John Pertwee, and I think we saw a little bit of Sylvester. They didn't really show much of him in that scene, so not too sure why that was. Yep, there you go. And I don't think there was much of the Eighth Doctor or in fact, okay, maybe the Eighth Doctor we saw based on that prequel to the 50th anniversary, that sort of mini episode that they did showing the Eighth Doctor regenerated to the War Doctor, that whole mini-sode that they did in the 50th anniversary. But yes, it was really nice, and we heard a little bit of Tom Baker in there, and I think we saw a little bit of Peter Davison's Doctor, even though we didn't really, or we kind of heard him, but we just didn't see the scenes of him on the telly screen. But either way, it was really cool that they did like a whole flashback, previous incarnations of the Doctor in that scene, which was really lovely. And the fact that, the Doctor mentioned he controls the story within the brain tree that we saw in terms of the engine. So that was a really cool scene that came out of the story. But overall, I honestly believe this story was actually, I feel like it was really well suited for this series. Actually, I feel like the whole idea of having a haircut was they have to tell a story when they're having a haircut. I thought that was, which is very typical in a barbershop, because usually when you're in a barbershop, you usually chat to the barber sometimes. If you have like a connection to your favorite, your hairdresser, aka barber, usually cuts your hair. You have that sort of connection to want to tell stories when you're there. Yeah, that's usually if you have a good connection to the barber that you're trusted to cut your hair and stuff. Yeah, so I thought that was really cool that we had that sort of like moment where they sit in the barber chair and they tell their story, and then eventually the machine tells them if it's good or not, the red and green light. So that was really interesting that was the thing. But yeah, overall, I really enjoy. And also the other scenes, we obviously can't ignore the whole red TARDIS alert where we all thought Belinda was controlling the TARDIS, when actually it's really interesting because she didn't really necessarily fly the TARDIS. She was essentially trying to calm the TARDIS down from whatever torment it was having, and then obviously she found out it was the barbershop, so it turns out that she had to investigate. But also, before she went into the barbershop, she encountered a child who was looking at her. She looks at the missing posters, and then when she turns back to face that child, the child's gone. And then when she mentions to the Doctor, oh, have you seen this child? The Doctor was like, oh no, I never seen it. And he looked very puzzled by that moment. So I'm wondering if the child has something to do with Belinda and maybe to do with the reality war. What do you reckon? Do you reckon that it might be tied into the finale and related to Belinda in some way? I'm just curious about what that means. Could that mean, there's something to do with this child that's going to be important to Belinda? I just thought that was really interesting that Belinda puzzled when she saw that child, and then when she turned face, she puzzled even more when the child just disappeared. I don't know. There might be something there. We're not too sure if if there is something there, but I just feel like it was worth mentioning in case it might be important for the series finale, but it might not mean anything, but you never know. There might be something there. Of course, I mean, I also feel like that this story also has that little bit of like Black Panther, I've noticed, because obviously most of the characters that we see kind of, they definitely feel like characters that you would see because of the way that, because they tried to stay true to the whole Nigerian culture, which is something that, obviously we've seen in Black Panther movies, which if you've watched the Black Panther movie, you'll understand, that culture exists within Black Panther because that's the part of the character, part of the people around. So it's really interesting that we're now starting to see, like I said, I find that very interesting that we had that sort of Black Panther vibes going on throughout the story about the way that people were telling their stories, and especially the villains who were telling their stories. I thought they sense of that Black Panther feel to it, which I thought was really, really nice. The only time we saw Mrs. Flood in this story was when the Doctor talks about the flashbacks he had Belinda, where Belinda was trying to save a grandmother and she thought she died the next day, or I believe it's based on the next day. She obviously comes across Mrs. Flood, who says, "Hi, Belinda, I'm just getting my medication." So yeah, we just had that sort of Mrs. Flood villainous or anything in regards to Mrs. Flood. She was just being her normal self. I find very interesting that we went from her being somewhat very suspicious behavior to just being her normal self, like a human being, which is, I find that very interesting that in that flashback she was just a human being in that moment. We know, but we've seen in recent weeks more than just this human being. She's more of like this, kind of feels more alien the way she's been behaving, and very evil the way she's been behaving in recent weeks. So maybe it was just before this evil version of Mrs. Flood happened, or maybe she's just pretending and she's playing off from what's happening, maybe. But then, of course, when Belinda sees the grandmother, she talks about the fact that, oh, the Doctor saved me and I can't thank you enough. I find it interesting because if the Doctor did save that grandmother, I think the grandmother would give the flowers to the 15th Doctor and not Belinda, because, I mean, Belinda wasn't the one who, because Belinda didn't think she saved, but yet the Doctor did. So technically, the Doctor should have got the flowers because he basically went there and saved her so that she can thank Belinda, or maybe he tried to pretend to be Belinda, saving her life, and then that's what led to her thanking Belinda, say, "Oh, thank you for saving my life," when really it was the Doctor trying to be Belinda, saving her life. I'm starting to think that might have been what happened and why she thanked Belinda in the first place. It was really chilled, a really chilled story, and also really, really powerful for a Nigerian style story. And I love the fact that the Doctor connects with the people like he knows them, which is really interesting because, well, we never see the Doctor talk about any friends he has in Nigeria. So this is the first time we've heard this officially in Doctor Who. So I would imagine this is going to mean that we're going to see these people a little bit more off down the road. Maybe we'll see them again, maybe not. But I just thought maybe we'll get mentions of them down the road, considering this is a somewhat of an important, well, obviously Omos is a very important character to the Doctor, considering he goes to that barbershop a lot. So it makes you wonder that maybe Omos could be a character we might see at some point, maybe when the 15th Doctor regenerates. Omos is, I'm just saying, maybe there could be something there. Nevertheless, I honestly really enjoyed the story, and I love the fact that, the Doctor just loves that culture of Nigeria. I love how this Doctor embraces he's embraced in that country as like an important figure, and I love that. And the fact that we see stories of him saving Nigeria from the fires really shows you how important this character is to that town and that city, which is really, really, really cool that we see that pass through within the story. But I would love to hear from everyone's thoughts about what you think of the story. This story is really good for that sort of Nigeria, to get the feel of a culture. I feel like this is a culture story because of the fact that we have this whole Nigerian culture thing going on with the Nigerian god spider stories that are feeding the engine, etc. And that sort of thing existed in the world of in that episode, which is really, really well done. And the fact originally they were telling people, "Oh, you can't leave," when technically it was a spider who was trying to carry the barbershop in outer space, even though in the actual real world the barbershop is still alive. It's just sitting there and it feels deserted around. So that was really cool. That was the thing. Got a preview of the Interstellar Song Contest. We saw a bit of Ryland in that clip, obviously being the presenter of the Interstellar Song Contest. We see the character who's trying to hijack, well, the song contest, of course. But then also at the same time, we see Belinda stuck in the ceiling. We see the Doctor being floated into what seems to be like galaxy thing going on, which I feel like that's something to do with the cliffhanger for the story, which I think it's probably going to have something to do with it, considering, he's flying up in the sky and he can't get down. So I feel like, that's something to do with cliffhanger that I would imagine Mrs. Flood has something to do with that, considering she is obviously in this episode. She's in the audience, so we know she's going to, we kind of suspect that we're going to see the reveal about Mrs. Flood next week, and that's where evil plan comes into fruition and the Doctor doesn't have any way of escape. I feel like that's going to be the recurring theme next week's story, and I cannot wait for this story next week because I feel like there's going to be a lot to talk about when we review this story. So it's probably going to be a long review, just to warn you now, because probably going to be a lot to digest because it feels like it's going to be shock after shock after shock. This story was kind of like the more chill before the storm sort of storyline, which I think is good because it means, you need that chill story before something massive like the Interstellar Song Contest. How big that story is going to be next week comes along. You need something really chilled this week so you can prepare yourself for what's to come, which I'm glad they done that. And yes, so that is my sort of thoughts of the story and the engine. I actually feel characters were well presented. I love, especially the barber himself, what he used to call himself as the barber, pretend he sort of believed he was, speaking for the god of the spider god, and then it turned out that he was trying to get home, or he was trying to take the spider home. The Doctor convinced him to let the people go back to their homes, and they managed to get rid of that spider so that barbershop can be the barbershop it's supposed to be, which I love. And then obviously almost gave the barber cloaks, and now he's basically in charge hairs going forward. Of course, the Doctor's going to visit him at some. So that was really. But either way, let me know what you think of the conversation below when you make of this story. And of course, we'll have the overnight figures, and potentially, obviously, we're probably going to get a lot of news regarding the Interstellar Song Contest next, leading up to next week's broadcast. Really looking forward to next week, and I actually thought this story was good. Story of the end. I think Story of the Engine was actually really chilled and really. Thanks for watching. I'll catch you all in next week's review of the Interstellar Song Contest, and also look out for my news videos coming up during the week. Catch you then, Whovians.